Hello everyone, this is part 8 of What If Naruto Was Madara's Brother, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Armed warriors ran across the town with determination and anxiety burning in their eyes. Chaos was spreading across every nook and corner as the war drums and alarm bells continued to ring louder and louder with every passing second. Terrified screams see through the lands as the frightened civilians were being directed towards the shelters inside the strong castle. A large army of fighters gathered behind him ready to fight and on a single command. He couldn't say if his people felt the same as him, but in the eyes of many he saw the same look as the one he had in his own eyes. Madness, the hunger for battle, the desire to fight, the resolve to emerge victorious with victory or death. The sweet sound of steel clashing against steel, of the screams of men and women, of the BNG that flew all around them, of the fear in the eyes of their enemies when they delivered the final blow. Naruto glanced at his ancestral sword, Dawn, with its finely crafted blade and the hilt that bore the sigil of a dragon. Fire and be. There was power in those ancient words. An immeasurable force that made his kind brim with pride and confidence. Many called it arrogance, and he had never denied it being such, for it was what it was, because their kind was worthy of that fear and respect. It was that same fear that made the Hatakis and Yamanakas join his forces waiting for his command. He could feel his bee pumping, his heart threatening to burst out with joy, the intoxication threatening to flood away his senses as he experienced the feeling of the sweetest thing in the world about to touch his lips. Battle. Nothing was more terrifying and nothing more glorious. He was never one to seek it openly, but there was one family with whom he actively sought it. Senju. He could still see his brother's S before his eyes. Of the sharp kunai hitting an AB in the N as he choked on his own B, of Yashiro wildly fighting in grief before blowing himself up, taking down more Senjus with him. Of that sword El Izuna's C and the feeling of watching his beloved brother S in his arms. He trembled with hate and revenge burning deep inside of him. He must be looking quite terrifying with his Sharingan, for not a single one of his men dared to taunt him or ask any question. They dared not speak, for his K intent threatened to S them should they step out of line. His Khans guard stood around him, proud and silent. He could feel the darkest parts of his soul morphing into reality, having only experienced such feelings the day he K his own kin, earning the name, K. Even Kurama maintained his distance and was not going to participate in the battle, knowing how personal this was to Naruto. The boy knew the fox was capable of ending this fight single-handedly, but that would not sit well with his friend who had yearned for this chance for a very long time. Also, if the beast fought against the Senjus, it would only bring more attention to it, which was not what Naruto wanted at this time. In that moment, Kurama saw every ounce of Indra coming alive in the boy as he glared at the massive defender force of more than 1,000 men. Any of you tries to flee, cowers, or S without K3 Senjus, warned Naruto, flaring his K intent, fully making dozens of his troops fall to their knees. The madness showed in his eyes as he made his promise. I'll burn them and their families alive. He smiled viciously when he saw them all nod fearfully and turned around swiftly with his Khans guard falling in line. Together the 6 of them, all dressed in battle armor with dark cloaks fluttering from their backs, marched forward with the allied army at their back. Their shining swords yearning for the taste of Senju B. The members of the Khans guard watched their leader keenly, observing as their large army took up positions, with many hiding themselves away from the eyes of the approaching enemy. Are the traps in place? Asked Naruto coldly, without any emotion in his voice except for hate. It's done, Lord Commander, replied Itachi affirmatively. Each of you take up command of different units across our flanks. I'll hold the center, commanded Naruto stoically. Naruto, a massive force of Senjus, Sarutobis, Inazukas and Akamikis are approaching towards us. Our sensors and barrier teams place their numbers twice than our own, warned Kagami, and shivered when he saw the merciless smile on his friend's face. More bastards to K. Each of the Khans guard looked at each other, quite uncertain over their leader and friend's dangerous behavior. They had known Naruto to be a calm and capable battle commander who usually preferred tactics over brute force. But today he was doing the opposite. To be more accurate, his hatred for the Senjus was overwhelming every other feeling in his heart. Is Tobirama Senju leading them? Shisui flinched when he felt the B in his friend's voice. They had heard of Madara's obsessive rivalry with Hashirama Senju, and in that regard Naruto was not much different from his elder brother, for he had an unhealthy hatred for Tobirama Senju. Answer me. They all flinched except for Itachi at his brutal commanding voice, and it was only when Shisui nodded in confirmation did the monstrous K intent lift away from them. Any last orders? Questioned Takeshi obediently, which was a stark contrast to his rebellious nature. But even a hothead like him could see that Naruto was not going to tolerate any mistakes or even japes this time. Naruto stared at his friends and saw the fear in their eyes. Not only their enemy outnumbered them and comprised of powerful warriors, but they were more worried with his hatred. But he could not stop. For years, he had dreamed of this moment when he finally avenged his brother. And now that it was here, he could not bring himself to care about anything else. Not the clan, not the fate of their new alliance with the Hatake or Yamanaka clans, or even his friends. All he could see, all he could feel was hate. He saw them still staring at him expectantly, waiting for his last order before they marched into battle. Memories from his worst nightmare came haunting back. Before his eyes he saw an unholy fire burning across sacred temple grounds, the sound of men, women and children begging and screaming in pain. The foul air that had lurked in the skies that night, the memory of a young boy standing in the midst of a horrible dream. Those words heard that night that plagued him every day after, ones he mumbled 1,000 times in sleepless nights. Them all. He saw them all freeze, but as a testament to their courage they all then nodded before all of them except for one disappeared away to carry out their orders. But her eyes stayed on him, taking in the haunting look in his eyes as he relived the two worst nightmares of his life. Days he would never forget in his entire life. He didn't stop her when she came forward and laid a passionate K on his lips, one which he hesitantly returned. It was short, and when she parted from him, there was a silent pleading in her eyes. No words were spoken, but he could hear her desire nonetheless in those eyes of hers. Stay alive. He didn't reply or gave any sign that he heard her or even accepted her request. Mikoto nodded with a sigh before his lips one last time before vanishing away to carry out her duty. When he turned back to face the battlefield, all emotions and feelings disappeared from his eyes. He had no remorse or hesitation in his heart for what he was about to do. For he was no hero. He was a selfish person who only wanted to fulfill the desires of his own heart. He was the K. He was the cursed man. Tobirama Senju lay crouched on the ground with one finger pressed against the soft grass. His closed eyes displaying his level of concentration as his allies lay anxious around him. When he opened his eyes, he saw the worried gaze of his little brother Atama staring back at him. Their flanks are too strong. But the center formation looks breakable, suggested the white-haired Senju. Then let me attack them and tear their to pieces, spoke Akio Inuzuka with a savage grin, but was surprised when Tobirama shook his head. You'll take the left flank and Sasuke Sarutobi shall take the right. I, Atama, along with the Senjus and few Akamaiki will attack the center formation. Any sides that breaks through is ordered to head straight for the town and reach the Yamanaka clan head, if possible even the Hatake clan head captive as well. Hashirama wants them alive and unharmed, do you understood? Asked Tobirama icily, boring his cold eyes into the Inuzuka heir who glared at him. They are traitors. A sharp burst of K intent made the dog warrior and his battle partner flinch as Tobirama's glare rained down on him in full force. Do you want to test Hashirama's patience? He watched in satisfaction as nearly everyone cowered, for they were all aware of Hashirama's power. The Senju clan head was a kind and honorable man, but was swift in dealing with any who disobeyed him. Understood, they all chorused, some with great reluctance earning a stiff nod from Tobirama. When their factions started to divide themselves, he saw Atama's pleading eyes, and even when his little brother didn't say anything, Tobirama understood his request. You will lead the attack with me and take command of our troops on the battlefield, commanded Tobirama. But, a firm hand was placed on his shoulder and Atama Senju saw the grave look in his brother's eyes. I am trusting you, Atama. Lead the attack while I deal with someone who is waiting for me, explained Tobirama honestly. Who? Asked Atama hesitantly. The K. Atama froze. He looked into his brother's unflinching eyes and saw no sign of fear and hesitation. Tobirama was the most skilled warrior of their clan after Hashirama, even stronger than Atama and Tsunade. But the K was a monster in his own right. One who butchered an entire clan in single combat, wielder of the Sharingan and the finest swordsman in the Land of Fire, even across the elemental nations, for according to many who had seen his prowess. He was not someone to be taken lightly, and now his brother was going to face that man. "Let me help you," pleaded Atama, receiving a swift glare from his elder brother. "This is between me and him, gods know he hates me for K, his brother. Anyone who tries to stop him by getting in his way to reach me will meet a brutal death. It is why I will confront him before he wreaks havoc on our allies. It is your responsibility to break through his lines, and in case I fall." "Brother, listen," scolded Tobirama harshly, but softened when he saw Atama on the verge of tears. Gods, the boy was even more soft of heart than Hashirama. It made Tobirama wonder if entrusting his brother was a burden too heavy for him, but despite his insecurities and shy nature, Atama was a good fighter. Their people loved him and he was well respected. And there was no one Tobirama trusted more than his brother right now. "If I fall, run. Don't try to save me, for you'll only get K, and I cannot bear watching us. Don't throw your life away in vain," said Tobirama gently. He could still remember the day when he K Izuna Uchiha on the battlefield. The grief he had seen in the K eyes that day promised Tobirama that he would never have peace until either he or the K were S. In a way, he could understand that Uchiha's feelings for if anyone hurt or worse K any of his brothers and sister. Tobirama shivered as he realized the extent of rage and hatred that would seep through him if that happened. And the K had already lost 3 brothers against the Senjus. The stronger their love, the stronger their hate, and the worse their madness. He could still remember his father's words about the Uchiha and the grave warning in them. It was why Tobirama knew it was he who had to face the K, and no one else. Atama reluctantly nodded and was surprised when Tobirama hugged him fiercely. Words couldn't describe how proud he was of his little brother, for in this world of madness and hatred this boy was still pure and kind. Something which Tobirama dearly wished to preserve. They soon parted as Atama gave the command, making the Senju and Akamaiki warriors march forward. Tobirama quickly caught Toka Senju before she joined the others. The dark-haired girl curiously stared at him with a raised eyebrow but saw the Senju's gaze lingering on the form of his brother. "Look after him." She didn't miss the worry for his brother in his voice and firmly nodded, earning a brief smile from him. But before he could walk away, she grabbed his hand and made him look back at her. "Does it have to be you?" she asked sadly. A resigned smile came on his face as he kissed her forehead. "It can only be me." Left flank. Itachi and Kagami saw the swarm of crows and vultures that had started to linger in the sky. An omen of the carnage that was about to happen. They exhaled deep breaths as the rustling of leaves and grass started to become more louder, marking the arrival of their enemies. The sound of dogs barking reached their eyes, making them both exchange a knowing nod. Glancing around, they saw their 400-strong force made up of Hitaki, Uchiha and few Yamanaka preparing themselves as both Kinsguard members gave the signal. Itachi had no doubt in his mind that if any of their flanks was crushed, then they were done for, because the Senjus and their allies outnumbered their side quite heavily. Kagami suspiciously glanced at the Hitaki and Yamanaka warriors. They might be allies now, but he could not shake off the feeling of mistrust he had towards them, for one of those clans was a former Senju ally and the other was about to become one before they were forced to bend the knee to the Uchihas. "If these bastards turn on us," warned Kagami, drawing a flat look from Itachi. "We hold the line," asserted Itachi, which made Kagami chew his lip nervously. "We might have to retreat," advised Kagami, and was surprised when Itachi shook his head. "The Kinsguard doesn't flee from the battlefield." Those words brought some of the confidence back in Kagami's heart as he remembered the power of his sworn brothers and sister. They were each worth a dozen warriors currently standing behind them, and even if the situation demanded, they wouldn't flee or retreat. Because Naruto wouldn't, neither would any of their other brothers and sister. Steeling himself, Kagami nodded while placing a firm hand on Itachi's shoulders, making the silent boy glance at him, and Kagami hoped to convey his conviction with his last words before the battle. "Here we shall stand," promised Kagami, earning a small smile from Itachi. The two Kinsguard, dressed in finely crafted bronze armor bearing the dragon sigil on their sea and the Uchiha crests on their backs, stepped ahead of their army, their long black cloaks gracefully fluttering behind their backs. Itachi was the first to catch sight of the Inuzuka dogs charging through the front lines and quickly performed a set of hand seals. Sealing arts, 7-star barrier. Across the dense forests, 7 seals engraved deep in the hearts of trees came alive, and within seconds the charging dog army came to a sudden halt. Their Inuzuka partners growled furiously as some of them were also caught in the trap. Itachi charged forward without warning and jumped high in the air, his hands grabbing a bunch of kunai from his pouch. Twisting himself gracefully in the air, he let loose the entire volley, which instantly multiplied into a large barrage, tearing down the trapped enemy forces brutally. The entire enemy first line was decimated, which was the signal Kagami was waiting for as he saw the next wave charging towards them and Itachi's seals disappeared. He gave a mighty roar as his entire body was engulfed in bright blue flames of chakra. Kaiman, Gate of Opening. Itachi smirked when Kagami disappeared in a flash and appeared right before the first Inuzuka, who gasped when a solid punch connected with his head, splattering it to shreds. 2 furious dogs leapt towards Kagami, but he flipped in the air, bringing down his hard feet, crashing against their heads, ending their miserable lives. The Inuzuka, who were known and feared for their taijutsu prowess, were stunned when Kagami started tearing them apart with his fast moves and S-attacks. Seeing his friend had destroyed any coordination in the enemy attack, Itachi turned towards their surprised allies, who had just watched these two Konosuba decimate nearly 24 ninjas in the first few minutes itself, all on their own, and they looked ready for more. "With me," commanded Itachi, raising his sword. The Hatake swordsmen gave out their own war cries, followed by the stunned Yamanakas, who also joined the charge following Itachi's lead. Soon enough the two factions clashed against each other, starting a brutal right flank. Shisui tensely watched as his forces, comprised of nearly 500 fighters, stepped into battle formation. By his sides were Mikoto and Takeshi with their swords ready. Tension was ever present in the air, which turned even worse when the war cries of hundreds of Sarutobi, Akamaki, and few Senjus reached them. He narrowed his eyes when many Akamaki transformed into rolling balls of massive size and moved towards his lines at terrifying speeds. But he had been expecting that from the moment he saw who was leading this attack. "They want to break our lines with brute force," suggested Takeshi, and saw Shisui nod in acceptance. "Take command of our units and wait for my signal," said Shisui, earning a nod from the younger boy as he quickly joined the Yamanaka units without any protest. "You think we can hold them?" asked Mikoto hesitantly. "We will." She smiled at Shisui's confidence and had no reason to doubt his resolve, for he was not only a fighter but someone with whom she wouldn't mind fighting side by side to the death. When the Akamakis started to get dangerous close, making the ground tremble with their mass, Shisui raised a single-hand seal, and soon enough those charging monsters were assaulted by hundreds of crows swooping down from the skies. Shisui's eyes were closed, but Mikoto saw the Akamakis had stopped abruptly. Instead of charging ahead, the giant monsters actually turned back and reverse charged towards their own forces that screamed in terror. "Now." Mikoto nodded instantly when the command escaped from Shisui's lips, making her give the signal to her brother. Several Uchiha fighters and few Hatake warriors joined her as she led the charge, with her twin brother Takeshi doing the same with the Yamanaka fighters. Together they formed 2 offensive flanks and charged into the broken enemy lines that were still being ravaged by out-of-control Akamaki fighters. "Uchihas!" she shouted, making her brother and their clansmen create a fine first line. Together they all performed a set of hand seals very familiar to them at great speed. Few Sarutobi and Senjus actually recognized their move despite the chaos and hastily charged ahead to counter, but had to start dodging when the few Hatakes that had taken position in the trees started raining down exploding kunais on them, creating further mayhem across the battlefield. Fire style, Great Fire Annihilation. Such a dangerous and powerful jutsu was not possible to perform for any Uchiha alone except for ones like Madara. But together they were all able to create this move, and soon enough the flames that were launched from the mouths of her clansmen engulfed a large portion of the forest. Men and women screamed as they were caught helpless in the blazing inferno. Like headless chickens they ran, with some trying to find sources of water. Some even tried to create water jutsu but were seized down by the Hatake marksmen that continued to shower a rain of death from their positions in the tall trees. When the destruction ended, there were dozens of charred bee that were barely recognizable, on the verge of turning to ashes and disappearing forever. Takeshi grinned savagely when he saw Shisui flying in the air on top of a giant crow with his hands still performing the seal controlling the out-of-control Akamaki. But soon enough the Genjutsu master released the jutsu much to the relief of the enemy forces. But it didn't last as the dangerous Uchiha clasped his hands together whispering, "Genjutsu, Field of Darkness." When their enemies cried that they were not able to see anything as a sudden darkness stole every ounce of light from their surroundings, then Takeshi cheered leading the charge of his clansmen. He's his first enemy across the T, ending the miserable boy's life, and saw his clansmen begin the butchering of the disarrayed enemy forces. However, a few enemies had broken out of the Genjutsu and Takeshi grinned, for at least there were some capable fighters in the enemies. With a savage battlecry, he and his twin sister attacked them. Center formation. Naruto could feel the enemy approaching and there were a lot of them. More than the forces under his command, but that was to be expected since he had decided to strengthen his flanks while taking the risk of annihilation on himself. With him were majority of the Uchiha force, fewer Hatakis and most Yamanakas. Together they made up a strong army of nearly 300 fighters. The odds were heavily against them, but there was no other choice but to fight, or risk everything they had gained so far. He grasped his ancestral sword firmly in his grasp as the first enemy forces entered his line of vision. Activating his Sharingan, he charged forward and smirked when he s the blade clean through a surprised Senju's heart. The battlefield came alive as his supporters and the enemies now clashed in open combat. Weapons, jutsu, and body parts went flying along with the bee-curling screams of the S&S. Lightning release, thunder armor. His entire body was coated in bright sparks of lightning that savagely eat the Senjus very close to him. His own ancestral sword now coated in the element. It was why he loved the weapon, for not only was it made up of the finest steel but had engraved in it secret seals that allowed it to manifest the type of chakra its wielder used. With a grin, he attacked any who dared to challenge him. His sword now laced with lightning carved through his enemy's armor like a knife see-through butter, and he didn't flinch when they one after another screaming in agony. He saw one unit of his clansmen being viciously attacked by dozens of Senju. Quickly he formed a hand seal, producing two of his shadow clones who wordlessly ran to the aid of their clansmen, and soon enough the Uchihas were fighting back. Parrying another attack, he delivered a swift and brutal kick to his enemy's genitals. The woman gasped in pain, but her eyes widened when his sword s through her open end, showering him in B and G. Mercilessly, he twisted his sword, causing a large surge of lightning to seep into her body. The Senjus gasped in horror when their Kanoiki's head exploded, earning a savage laugh from the K. They all flinched away from him until a one-eyed Senju dressed in fine armor charged ahead, clashing his sword against Naruto's. He's stronger than the others. Naruto didn't know why, but he had a feeling he had seen this Senju before. Despite his innocent looks, the boy was fighting back with great strength and courage. Roaring once more, he tried a horizontal S towards Naruto's C, but the K easily sidestepped from the attack, placing his passing hand on the Senju's back. Atama Senju screamed when vicious bolts of lightning attacked his entire body. His nerves screamed, his B boiled, his lone eye threatened to burst open, and in his hazy vision he saw the K bringing his long sword towards his back. Now he knew why Tobirama had warned him not to engage this man, but he had forgotten his elder brother's advice when he saw his clansmen being seized down by this monster. He had to do something to help them. But now he was going to rest painfully, which made him close his eyes. Naruto froze mid-attack and had to urgently bring his sword forward just in time as Tobirama Senju's sword clashed against his own. There was a monstrous outburst of chakra from the white-haired Senju's body that sent Naruto sailing away. Quickly regaining his balance, he flipped himself and landed gracefully across the battlefield and saw the man he hated most standing before him. "Little brother," whispered Tobirama, cradling the badly burnt Atama in his arms. The sight brought a new wave of sadness as anger in Naruto's heart as he remembered the words said to him by the person he had loved most in this world. "Be happy, little brother. Izuna." Tobirama. The Senju looked up and his eyes widened when a monstrous outburst of chakra exploded from Naruto's body, sending dozens of Senjus and Sarutobis sailing away. The K intent that spread across the forest was enough to make Tobirama flinch, for he saw the unending hatred in Naruto's eyes that threatened to destroy everything Tobirama held dear. He quickly handed off his injured brother to Toka, who dragged the boy away to safety as Tobirama got up on his feet, meeting the K burning red eyes. He had seen those same eyes in Madara and knew the power it gave to its wielder. He raised his sword in preparation as Naruto marched towards him, fury and hatred burning in his Sharingan eyes. Only to freeze suddenly. A shocked and even more furious expression came on his face as he glanced at the Yamanaka who had attacked his mind. His eyes widened when the blonde-haired turncoats started attacking the shocked Uchihas and Hatakis. The tides changed within seconds as the traitor Yamanakas joined up with the Senju forces, beginning the S of the heavily outnumbered Uchiha and Hataki forces. He glanced at Tobirama, who gave him a blank look. And he knew. In all the chaos of this surprise attack, everyone including him had failed to detect one minor detail. It had barely been 2 days since the Yamanaka officially surrendered to the Uchiha. Even if the Senju wanted to retaliate, it would have taken them time to assemble such a large force. Unless. Tobirama smiled at him coldly. You guessed right, K. The Yamanakas asked for our aid the moment you attacked them, confessed Tobirama. You, struggled Naruto, almost on the verge of breaking free from the invading presence in his mind. They surrendered to you because they knew fighting would only mean annihilation. So they waited for their allies to arrive, and now they shall have their revenge. You come into their home, butcher their people, K their clan heir, and expect them to surrender to your mad clan. I see the Hatakis are still fighting for you despite the changed situation. Tell me, what leverage do you have over them? Asked Tobirama knowingly. Naruto dared not reveal any information regarding the fact that Naori held Kiara Hataki as hostage, which was the main reason the Hatakis were still fighting for them. Thinking of his aunt holed up in that castle among the Yamanaka traitors made his heart stop. He had to save her. Glancing around, he saw majority of his supporters were seized down by the overwhelming enemy force. The few who were left wouldn't last long. He was trapped. With a wild roar, he broke the mind invasion of his attacker and swiftly sent a kunai that lodged itself right into the Yamanaka's head, ending the man's life. Hastily, he grabbed a flare from his pocket and launched it in the air just as Tobirama attacked him. He smiled even as he clashed swords against Tobirama, as the bright red flare had now given the message to his few allies to act on their contingency plan. As for him, he saw hundreds of Senjus, Sarutobis, Yamanaks closing down on the small circle of Uchihas and Hatakis that had stepped closer to him, hoping he could save them from their approaching deaths. He glanced at his arch-enemy and knew he had met his match, for Tobirama was just as cruel and cunning as him. His next words proved Naruto's belief. You're done, K. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.